Louise had lived on Maple Street for over 40 years. The little white house with green shutters had weathered many storms, both literal and emotional, but nothing had prepared her for this. The flood came in the dead of night, not with the dramatic warning of sirens or newscasts, but with a slow, creeping betrayal. She woke to a strange sloshing sound. At first, she thought it was a dream, but when her feet hit the floor, icy water soaked through her socks. The panic set in like a second skin. She flipped the light switch. Nothing. No power. Just the pale glow of the moon reflecting off the water, now inching its way across her living room. Louise moved quickly, adrenaline overriding her aching knees. She grabbed the photo albums from the bottom shelf, the jewelry box with her mother's wedding ring, the tiny porcelain elephant her late husband gave her on their second anniversary. Silly little things, but they were her silly little things. The water climbed higher. She opened her hallway closet and pulled down the quilt her grandmother had stitched by hand. The fabric was soft with age, the threads delicate. As she turned, a sudden splash startled her. The bookshelf had collapsed, sending books and picture frames floating like lost rafts. One frame drifted toward her, a photo of Jane, age 9, missing a front tooth and grinning with wild abandon. Louise reached out and caught it, her fingers trembling. She looked around and realized the walls were starting to buckle. Cracks ran across the paint like spider webs. The air smelled of wet wood and something else, the scent of loss. Louise stood there for a moment, chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. She felt the sting of salt water, not from the flood, but from her own eyes. She picked up the phone, heart thudding. Fingers fumbling, she called her daughter. The line rang once, twice. Then Jane's sleepy voice answered, "Hello?" Louise whispered, "Jane, the house. It's gone. I have nothing left." There was silence on the line, not the kind that comforts, the kind that tells you the person on the other end doesn't know what to say, or worse, doesn't know what to feel. Louise had hoped naively that calling Jane would change something. That maybe her daughter would hear the fear in her voice, the tremble beneath the surface, and say, "Come here, Mom, we'll figure it out." Instead, Jane sighed. A long, tired sigh, the kind people give when you've interrupted something important. "Mom, it's just, things are really hectic right now. Frank's barely sleeping with this work promotion hanging over him. And I'm already exhausted with the baby coming, and Emma in preschool, and—" Louise waited. The pause stretched. Then Jane added, "Can you just sleep in your car a little longer? Just until we get through this week." The sentence fell like a brick. Louise blinked, unsure she heard it right. "In my car? Well, yeah, I mean, it's temporary, right? You're strong. You've handled worse." She looked around. Her Honda Civic was parked behind a shuttered strip mall, tucked between a dumpster and a row of broken shopping carts. The dashboard glowed faintly from the dying battery. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, it was barely warmer. "Jane," Louise said softly, "it's December. I know. I need you to hang in there a little longer. For me, for Emma. You understand, right?" Louise looked up at the roof of her car. Water leaked slowly from the cracked sunroof. It hit her lap with a quiet, rhythmic plop, plop, plop. "I understand," she said, though she didn't. Not really. As the call ended, Louise kept the phone pressed to her chest. Her hands trembled not from the cold, but from something deeper. Rejection. Not loud, not violent, but quiet, surgical. The kind that doesn't bruise the skin, only the soul. And then, from nowhere, an image flashed in her mind. Frank, her son-in-law, looking at her over his coffee cup a few weeks ago. That stare. Cold, disinterested, as if she were a piece of furniture in the way. No worse, as if she were a bill no one wanted to pay. The first night at Jane's house, Louise told herself it was temporary, a week, 2 at most, just enough time to breathe, dry off, and figure out what to do next. Jane had smiled a tight, rehearsed smile and said, "Of course you can stay, Mom, just until you get back on your feet." But from the moment Louise unpacked her small duffel bag in the guest room, she felt it, that quiet, invisible pressure, the kind that doesn't come from words, but from glances, from silences. From the way Frank's footsteps paused whenever he walked past the door. The guest room was cold. Jane said the heating didn't quite reach that side of the house. Louise didn't ask again. On the third morning, Louise went to the kitchen to make toast. She opened the fridge and noticed a sticky note on the milk carton. "Organic milk, not for guests." She blinked. At first, she thought maybe Jane had written it for the babysitter. But then she found another note, this time on the bread. "Whole grain for Frank only." By the end of the week, the fridge and pantry looked like a passive-aggressive battlefield. Notes everywhere. "Don't finish the eggs." "We're tracking grocery expenses this month." "Toilet paper is disappearing fast." Louise didn't argue. She just quietly bought her own loaf of bread, her own toilet paper, a small carton of almond milk. She labeled them with a marker, "Mom," as if carving out proof of her right to exist in her daughter's fridge. No one shouted at her, no one slammed doors, but every breath she took felt like it cost someone else something. And that's when Louise realized she hadn't been given refuge. She'd been given a deadline. It happened on a Tuesday. Louise had just come back from a walk to the corner pharmacy, her small act of independence, when she saw Jane standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, her mouth tight. Emma was in her high chair smearing mashed banana across her tray with the innocent chaos only toddlers could make beautiful. Jane didn't say it right away. Instead, she opened with a weather report. "It might snow next week. You should make sure your car has antifreeze." Louise blinked. "My car?" Jane sighed. "Look, Mom, Frank's been really stressed. With work, the promotion, the budget stuff, and, well, with the baby coming, everything's just heavier." Louise felt the shift in air, the gentle push behind the words, the kind of sentence that's shaped like concern, but sounds like a bore slowly closing. "I don't mean to be rude," Jane continued, "but maybe it's time to think about, other arrangements, just for a while. You understand, right?" Louise nodded slowly, the cold creeping into her chest. "Yes," she said, "I understand." What she didn't say was, "I felt this coming the moment I unpacked my bag." She didn't argue, she didn't cry, she didn't ask, "Where will I go?" Instead, she walked to the guest room, pulled the black trash bag she'd used as a suitcase from the closet, and began folding her clothes with military precision. No one helped, no one stopped her. Before she zipped the bag, she walked into the kitchen one last time. Emma looked up at her and giggled, tiny banana hands reaching for her. Louise wiped the baby's chin, gently smiled, and whispered, "Be good, little one." Jane didn't look up. She was too busy scrolling on her phone. As Louise stepped outside, her daughter's voice followed her like a gentle slap. That's probably for the best. 90 nights. Louise had slept in her car for 90 nights. Not at once, not as a plan, but as a slow surrender. One uncomfortable evening became a few days, then a week, then 3 months. Her Honda Civic had become a tomb with cup holders. She parked in a different spot every couple nights, the back lot of an abandoned grocery store, a forgotten corner behind a gas station, once even behind a church where no one came on weekdays. Her rules were simple. Stay invisible, don't attract attention, always leave before sunrise. She used public restrooms at gas stations to wash up. A baby wipe here, a splash of cold water there. When the mirrors weren't cracked, she'd look into them and wonder if she still looked like a person, or just a breathing corpse, a woman whose body moved, but whose soul had gone quiet. Her meals were whatever she could buy for under $3. A bag of crackers, gas station coffee, sometimes a granola bar if she was feeling fancy. No one saw her. Not really. Not the teenage clerk who handed her change without making eye contact. Not the joggers who passed her parked car without a glance. Not even Jane, who still texted occasionally with updates about the new nursery or Emma's latest drawing. Never once asking, "Where are you sleeping, Mom?" That silence hurt more than hunger, because hunger you can feed, cold you can layer against, but invisibility, that erodes who you are. And after 90 nights behind fogged windows, Louise wasn't sure there was anything left to erode. She was on computer #7 at the public library, the one furthest from the window, the one that didn't freeze every 10 minutes. Louise had developed a routine: check job listings, check local shelters, apply for anything that didn't require a permanent address. She'd learned how to survive in limbo, but that Tuesday felt like any other Tuesday until she saw it. Subject: inheritance notification urgent. At first, she thought it was spam, one of those scam emails that promise a prince's fortune if you just send your bank info. She almost deleted it, but the sender's name stopped her. Harrison Blackwell and Associates, estate attorneys. Her heart thudded in her chest. Hands trembling, she clicked. Dear Miss Louise Qualls, we are contacting you regarding the estate of your late aunt Tilly Brendel. Tilly Louise hadn't heard that name in decades. Her mother's sister, the one who'd moved to California and slowly disappeared from Christmas cards, family reunions, and holiday phone calls. She kept reading. Mrs. Brendel named you the sole beneficiary of her estate? And then the words that made the screen blur with tears. The estate includes a home in Pasadena, CA, valued at approximately $850,000, and liquid assets totaling $320,000. There are minor debts to settle, but the net inheritance exceeds $1.2 million. Louise couldn't breathe. She clutched the edge of the plastic chair like it might float her above the shock. Around her, the library buzzed with normal life. Keyboard clicks, storytime giggles, rustling pages. But she felt like she'd stepped through a secret door no one else could see. A homeless woman reading an email that would make her a millionaire. She pressed her hands to her face, and for the first time in 3 months, Louise cried, not from hunger or cold or exhaustion, but from the terrifying, beautiful shock of being remembered. Louise stared at the screen for a long time after reading the email. The words kept replaying in her mind like a melody stuck on loop. $1.2 million. A house. Her name. On something solid again. Her first instinct was the most natural one. Call Jane. She reached for her phone, thumb hovering over her daughter's name. But something in her chest whispered so softly it barely registered at first. Not yet. She froze. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. And it wasn't revenge. Louise wasn't built that way. It was something quieter, older, like a seed that had been buried under years of polite silence and sacrifice, now sprouting through cracked earth. Let them show you who they are when they think you have nothing. She lowered the phone. The thought was not bitter, but clear. Jane had texted her last week asking if she was okay, right after announcing Frank's promotion and baby number 2. There were no follow-up questions. No. Do you have a roof tonight? No. Are you warm? Just updates, announcements, statements from a life that had no room for hers. Louise deserved to know what love looked like without the influence of inheritance. So she made a decision. No phone call. Not yet. She would take the next steps, call the lawyer, book the flight, step into this new life without giving anyone the chance to reframe it as something she owed them. For once, she'd hold something close, not out of secrecy, but out of self-respect. She glanced around the library. Her world hadn't changed yet. But inside her, something already had. The California sun hit differently. Louise stepped out of Lax with her tote bag and 2 grocery sacks, everything she owned in the world, and blinked into the gold-washed light. After months of gray Ohio skies, the December warmth felt almost suspicious. She half expected someone to grab her shoulder and say, "Sorry, mistake, this wasn't meant for you." But no one did. Instead, a driver held up a sign, Mrs. Qualls. It was the first time in years someone had called her that with a hint of respect. Not ma'am at a gas station, not hey lady at a waiting room, but Mrs. Qualls, as if she still belonged to something. The ride to Pasadena felt like a dream in motion. Palm trees waved lazily as they zipped down the freeway. The driver, a middle-aged man named Pedro, made small talk. "First time in California?" "First time in 40 years, she replied. He glanced at her in the mirror. "You coming back for business or family?" Louise hesitated, then smiled softly. "Maybe both." They pulled onto a quiet street lined with jacaranda trees, and there it was, just like in the photos. A 1920s craftsman bungalow with a wide front porch, sun-faded blue paint, and orange trees hanging low in the backyard, heavy with fruit. It didn't look rich. It looked real, rooted, waiting. Robert Rice, the estate attorney, met her at the front walk, tall, buttoned up, cautious. "Mrs. Qualls," he asked, almost surprised, "you made good time." She looked down at her shoes, scuffed but clean, and nodded. "I took the first flight I could afford." He handed her the keys like they weighed something holy. As she stepped onto the porch, her breath caught in her throat. The scent of lavender drifted through the air. Wind chimes danced softly above her head. Then a voice called out from next door, "You must be Louise." A woman in her 70s, sun hat on, gardening gloves still on her hands, walked toward the fence with open arms and open eyes. "I'm Sharon. I live next door." "Oh, honey, Tilly talked about you all the time." And just like that, Louise's knees nearly buckled, because for the first time in what felt like years, someone sounded glad that she had come. Louise found the box in the back of the hallway closet. It was labeled in Tilly's neat handwriting, Us, 1985 to Forever. She sat on the old hardwood floor, sunlight pouring through the window like honey, and opened the lid. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Tilly laughing on a picnic blanket, a woman with soft silver hair and a crooked smile, Patricia kissing her temple. Birthdays, road trips, Christmas mornings by a fireplace she didn't recognize. Cards signed, Love Always P. There were no children in the pictures. No nieces, no grandkids, just them. Two women in their own world, laughing, aging, growing together. Louise touched one photo gently. Tilly and Patricia holding hands barefoot in a garden, grinning like teenage girls. A letter fell from the back of the album. It was short. "If you're reading this, then I'm probably gone. Patricia was the best part of my life. We had 37 years, and while the world never fully welcomed us, we loved anyway. No apologies, no permission, just truth." Louise's hands trembled. She had spent the last decade begging her own daughter for scraps of warmth, always afraid of being a burden, while these two women had built a full life without apology or approval. She whispered to the empty room, voice thick with grief and awakening, "And I was out there begging for love, from people who share my blood but never my heart." She cried then. But not just for loss. She cried for all the years she thought she had to earn love. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, once, twice. Louise, still in her gardening gloves, wiped her hands on a dish towel before checking the screen. Text from Jane. "Hi, Mom. Hope you're doing okay. Frank just got promoted." That was it. No mention of where she was. No question about where she'd been sleeping for 3 months. No apology. Just news. Louise stared at the message, her face unreadable. A bird chirped outside. The orange trees swayed slightly in the breeze. She sat down at the breakfast nook, a place that had once belonged to someone who loved without asking for anything in return. She thought of Tilly, of Patricia, of the way their house whispered peace into her bones. She opened the message box and typed slowly, "I'm thinking about a lot of things right now." She paused, looked at it, then hit send. And for once, she didn't feel guilty for not making her daughter feel better. She didn't rush to say, "I'm so proud," or "That's wonderful, honey." Because right now, Louise was learning to center herself in her own story, and that silence was finally hers to own. Louise opened the door to find Jane and Frank standing on the porch, sunglasses on, California smiles beaming. "Wow," Jane breathed, stepping in and turning slowly. "This house is stunning, Mom," Frank added with a chuckle. "Pasadena looks good on you." They hugged like nothing had happened, like months of silence and exile were just a pause in conversation. Over lunch, quiche and fresh oranges from the backyard, the compliments continued. "You've really made this place feel warm," Jane said, sipping wine. "It reminds me of the kind of house, a family could grow in." Louise looked at her cautious. Frank cleared his throat. "So, we've been thinking about moving. Closer to good schools, good weather, somewhere safer for the kids. And," Jane chimed in, "we actually found this perfect house nearby." Her voice softened. "It's just, we're a little short on the down payment, like 60,000 short." The number dropped like a stone in a still pond. Jane leaned forward, eyes wide with manufactured vulnerability. "I mean, it's for the kids, and we know you've been blessed, Mom. It would mean everything to us." Louise felt her heartbeat slow. She looked at the hands that had once changed diapers, now reaching for something else. There it was. Not a scream, not a demand, just a soft, strategic punch to the ribs called family. The air shifted. The polite smiles, the soft wine-sipping, tension gone. Frank leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, voice dropping into that familiar condescension. "Let's stop pretending," he said flatly. "You have the money, Louise, and we're family. That should be enough reason to help." Louise set her fork down, calmly. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. His eyes weren't asking, they were demanding, entitled, sharp, cold. She exhaled, then answered. "You're right, Frank. I do have the money." He smiled as if that settled it. But then she continued, her voice steady, eyes unwavering. "But what I no longer have is blindness." Frank blinked. Louise stood up. "I used to confuse obligation with love. I used to think being needed was the same as being valued. I was wrong." She walked past them toward the sink as sunlight poured over the counter. "You're not here because you missed me. You're here because you found out I wasn't broke anymore." Silence. She turned. "And that changes everything." The old key didn't work anymore. Frank twisted the knob again, annoyed. Jane stood behind him, clutching a tote bag of excuses and half-hearted regrets. Inside the house, Louise stood by the window watching. Earlier that morning, she had gone to the hardware store, picked out the new locks herself, installed them, alone. No fanfare, no drama, just decision. Sharon from next door had peeked over the fence. "You need a hand, Louise?" Louise had smiled without looking up. "No, this one I need to do on my own." Sharon leaned against the fence, arms crossed, watched her work in the sun for nearly an hour. Then she said quietly, "She's not just changing locks, she's building a fortress right inside her chest." Now, back at the window, Louise didn't flinch as the doorknob rattled one last time. She simply turned, walked away, and let silence hold the line. Louise had just poured her second cup of coffee when she saw them. Frank, in a blazer, briefcase in hand, Jane, with croissants and that sing-song voice she saved for manipulation. "Mom," Jane called, walking up the stone path, "we thought we'd surprise you with breakfast." Louise stepped onto the porch, set her mug down. She didn't smile. She didn't move to open the door. Frank raised the briefcase slightly, like a peace offering or a contract. Jane chimed in, "We just want to talk, Mom, that's all." Louise looked at them, then pointed to the porch chairs. "Sit. Out here. I didn't invite you into my home." A pause. The line had been drawn. Not in anger, not in cruelty, but in clarity. Frank's jaw tightened. Jane forced a smile. They sat. Sunlight filtered through the orange tree. The air smelled like rosemary and distance. Louise picked up her coffee again. "So," she said, voice cool, "what briefcase reason brings you back this time?" Frank's voice cut through the air like static on a broken radio. "This isn't you, Mom," he said, gesturing around the porch. "You're not this house, not this California act. You're an old woman from Ohio. You fold napkins. You apologize when people interrupt you." Louise didn't blink. She let his words hang there, dry, desperate, arrogant. Then she spoke slowly, clearly. "Maybe I was that woman," she said. A breeze tugged at her hair. "But she died, somewhere between night 42 and 58, in the back seat of a 97 Honda Civic, under a wet blanket and a sky that didn't care." Frank shifted uncomfortably. Jane looked away. Louise leaned forward. "The version of me you knew?" she cried quietly. "She begged for space on a couch she bought. She said yes just to be allowed to exist." She took a long sip of coffee, then set the cup down firm. "She's gone. And the woman you see now," she smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just freely. "She's not folding anyone's napkins ever again." Jane stood awkwardly at the bottom of the porch steps, arms folded tightly like she was trying to keep something from falling apart. "I love you, Mom," she said, voice softer now, rehearsed, trembling, maybe even a little real. Louise looked at her daughter, then nodded. "And you love what I can do for you." Jane flinched, just slightly. Frank shifted behind her, clearing his throat. No one said anything for a moment too long. The sun was high now. The garden buzzed with life. Butterflies dancing over orange blossoms, wind chimes ticking gently. Louise stayed standing, straight-backed, grounded. Jane finally turned. They walked back toward the rental car. No hugs, no tears, no, "We'll call you soon." Just silence. And the sound of Louise's screen door clicking shut, like the final punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. 43 messages. Louise looked at them one last time, all from Jane. Some frantic, some sweet, some starting with, "Mom, I'm sorry," and ending with, "But we really need that down payment." She pressed and held the screen. Delete all. The phone screen went blank. And for the first time in decades, so did the space in her chest where the fear used to live. No more waiting, no more wishing, no more shrinking. She walked to the window, opened it wide. Outside, the orange tree danced in the breeze, its leaves whispering a lullaby made of sunshine and second chances. The air smelled like citrus and freedom. She smiled, not because someone told her to, but because no one could stop her anymore. Louise sat at her kitchen table, a real one, not a folding tray or backseat dinner plate. She had her coffee in one hand and the other holding a pen. The phone rang twice before the attorney picked up. "Miss Qualls?" he asked. "Yes," she said, voice calm. "I need to update my will." There was a pause on the line. "I want this house to go to someone who deserves more than what life handed them." She looked out the window. A hummingbird hovered near the orange blossoms. "And I want to start a scholarship for women in midlife, women who lost everything, homes, jobs, families, but still found the courage to get up anyway." She didn't tremble when she said it, because it wasn't about what she'd lost anymore. It was about what she was planting next. The sun dipped low, brushing the porch with gold. Louise set down 2 chipped mugs, one for her, one for Sharon. The scent of chamomile drifted between them. In her lap, a worn book of poetry. Behind her, the gentle hum of the garden, the same one she once stared at with disbelief. Now it was hers. Sharon leaned back in the rocker. "So, how's freedom treating you?" Louise smiled soft and certain. "I used to sleep in my car," she said. She looked out over the orange trees swaying like old friends. "Now I'm not just surviving. I'm living, finally." They didn't say much after that. Didn't need to. The breeze carried the rest of what couldn't be put into words. And Louise, for once, didn't feel like she owed anyone an explanation. Sometimes the people we fight hardest to please are the ones who never saw our worth in the first place. And freedom, it's not a destination, it's a decision. Louise didn't buy her peace with money. She built it with boundaries. You don't owe anyone your silence, your comfort, or your second chances, especially not those who only come when they know you have something to give. Real love doesn't demand proof. It shows up even when you have nothing. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever felt invisible, taken for granted, or simply tired of earning love that should have been freely given, then this channel is for you. Click subscribe and join us for more stories that don't just entertain, they remind you you're not alone. You never were.